Welcome to Current Events, everybody. We're so excited you've joined us today because we have a very special guest on the show today. But I'm going to let Christy introduce him. And so, Christy, take it from here.
What an honor this is. I can tell you with certainty it's the first time in all of my years that I'm actually a little bit nervous, so there's that. But we have with us today the absolutely incredible Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and what an honor it is. For those of you, I'm sure most of you would know him, but he is a retired Army general with over 33 years of service in the United States military and is chairman of America's Future, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. His military career culminated as the Director of Defense Intelligence Agency and as the nation's highest-serving military intelligence officer. After retiring from the Army in 2014 and as a private citizen, General Flynn went on to serve in a variety of businesses, educational and nonprofit roles, which included supporting veterans organizations around the country, and it's something he continues to do today. He's continued to do many incredible things, including serving as an advisor, very high level, to the 45th President of the United States, as you all know, President Trump, and it really is just an absolute honor to have him with us today. So General Flynn, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Christian. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Sometimes those introductions can sound like an obituary, but that one you made sound okay.
Thank you, sir.
So, here, I don't know where you guys want to start, but I really, first of all, to Christy, Jane, Danae, your endeavor to inform a wide range of people. It's just so I think a lot of people know right up front that Danae, our paths just crossed as part of this Reawaken America tour that we do, around the country. So, I am wide open for any questions, comments, statements. I really am excited to speak to you. I would like to address some of the issues that are going on around the world, and also some of the things that we're seeing right here at home. Some of the current events that are happening, and then just give you some kind of strategic focus of what I think is happening globally, and then we'll go from there. So, however you guys want to start, I'm always ready to roll here.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming. And I know Chrissy said she's a little bit nervous. I'm not anymore, because General has become my friend and has become very dear to me. And we've been going around doing the Reawaken America tour with Clay Clark, which has been so exciting and such an honor for us to be involved in that. So before we hit the current events of the world, because that's going to take us, how did you begin the Reawaken America tour with Clay Clark? How did that happen?
So first of all, the Reawaken America tour is really made up of just some really special champions, I call them. I think great people from all walks of life. And how this began, I actually went to an event in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to help out another friend on the political side, and at the tail end of what was happening to me from the sort of the persecution that I went through, that is now really many Americans and certainly people around the world are now seeing what just happened with all the the quote unquote Russia collusion story. I mean, the truth, like I always say, the truth will rise to the top always. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but it always does. But at the tail end, my family and I and a couple of my brothers and sisters, we talked about doing a thank you tour, because so many people came into my life, millions of people around the United States, and particularly through prayer groups and through letter writing campaigns and just all kinds of different means that people came into my life. And I was in the habit of, particularly on letters, I was in the habit of responding to a lot of letters that came to me. I would just sit at night, or I'd sit in early in the morning, and I'd write letters back to many people, to tens of thousands of people, actually. So I wanted to go around the country and do a thank you tour, in maybe 5 or 6 places, and just say thank you to different groups of people. And then as Clay and I got talking about it, Clay was really talking about, prophetic, because I know, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about the experiences that I think that I've seen, and certainly with what I've learned about your dad. But Clay at the beginning was really paying very close attention to all of the things that were happening, both from the Russia story, but also from what was happening with COVID and what was happening with our basic rights and freedoms in the country. And so the two of us had just a wonderful first connection. And from that connection, we have developed a really thick, what I would call a very thick bonding relationship. And so Clay started to talk about, well, let's expand it and let's talk about health and freedom, because the conversation that we were having about thanking people really turned into our basic rights and our basic freedoms. And then that then transcended into the whole issue about what was happening. And this is over a year ago now, or close to a year ago, with Clay, this conversation that I was having. So then we started in earnest, and we had the very first event in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I said that we met in Tulsa. About a month and a half later, we were then in front of about, I think, I don't know what it was. It was probably 8,000 people in this beautiful church in Tulsa. And that was the very first city that we were in. And then we started to move around the country, and we've gone to, Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've gone to Colorado Springs, Colorado. We've gone to Anaheim, California, San Antonio, Dallas, Tampa. Tampa, we had almost 12,000 people. I think 11,000 people in the month of June. It was like 110 degrees. I mean, but people came and they stayed. Like we had recently, Danae, I think as you saw up in Ohio, we had 5-degree weather and snow 2 days in a row, and people packed the place. I mean, we had 3,000 people packed in an auditorium that it probably could only fit. I think the Pastor Dave up there told me it could only fit maybe 2,700. So they added some more chairs and had the fire chief, give them a passing grade and all that kind of stuff. So we started to call these things health and freedom. But after about 4 or 5 events, we then came to the reality, or the realization that this is really about reawakening America. Because every time we went to a place, we found people who just did not know some of the things that we were telling them. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of reasons are, or some of the reasons are, certainly the media. The mainstream media just is not telling the truth, or they're lying. They're lying to us. They what they do is they either spew propaganda, or they project what they do to us as though we are, we are doing it to them, right? Projection, and definitely propaganda, and definitely just flat out lies from the mainstream media. The tech world was censoring all of us. I mean, I've been censored and canceled. Even churches, though. So, because I want to bring this to churches too. But so we turn these things in about a third of the way through to Reawaken America, and they have just taken off. We have the next one on the 11th and 12th of March in San Diego, and I think that's around 3,000 people. We have about 300 tickets left. That's in about another month. And then in Oregon, and I forget the date, but it's early April. We are almost sold out in Oregon. So that tells you a lot. I mean, it tells you people. It's like when we went to Anaheim before in California. I stood on this stage and I said, "Why are we in California? We're in California because we are not going to give up on the people of California, the Americans of California that believe in this country and believe in the type of in the founding of this country and how our nation was founded and why it was founded. But it was really founded on really Judeo-Christian values and principles. That was really the premise of America, and that goes back to the 1600s. So, we can have a whole show on the history and the development and the founding of this nation all the way through the signing of the Constitution, if you want. But the Reawaken America tour is just that. It is to get people, and as I like to say, get people engaged, to stand up, step up, speak up, and get involved at the local level. The phrase I use is local action has a national impact, or local action equals a national impact. So nobody can have an excuse any longer that says, well, I'm going to leave it up to the politicians, and or I'm going to just make excuses for politicians. No, or somebody says, I don't do that political thing. Well, that's no longer an excuse. You cannot use that excuse. If you're an American citizen, you have to understand that we have an experiment in democracy, and our government is called a republic. It's a republic form of government, meaning we duly elect our officials who then represent us in whatever county, state, federal position that they're in. But we're a representative form of system of government called a republic. That's what the United States is. So no longer can the citizenry of this country stay in this sort of apathetic mindset, which I really, I'm in my 60s. I look at my generation and I say that my generation is really the generation that's going to either continue to stand for democracy and to maintain this democracy that we have, this constitutional republic that we have, or we are going to give it up to tyranny and socialism, or worse, Marxists. So, because that's the direction that we are being drawn, and I'll stop here in a second. But if you look at the primary English-speaking nations of the world, right? You have, of course, the United States, but the other four primary ones are New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. I mean, there's a lot of other nations that speak English, but it's really a secondary language. You could say Canada speaks English as a secondary language, but not really. The majority of people in Canada speak English. So those 5 countries are the primary ones. Well, 4 of them right now. Canada we see is under a dictatorship now. I mean, it is no other way to say it. It's underneath a tyrannical form of government. Essentially, even the Parliament voted to maintain a form of martial law here based on what the Prime Minister said. We all know what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. Both those countries are completely locked down, and they're under a different form of system of government than they were. And everybody goes, in Australia and New Zealand, when all that was happening, people in this country kind of went, that's too bad. I'm sorry for what's happening. But it's 8,000 miles away, so it doesn't feel like Canada does all of a sudden. So Canada is right on our neighborhood here. And then the other is the United Kingdom. And you see Boris Johnson now, he's starting to say we're going to remove all the various mandates, because they know that what's coming next is a rise of the population in the United Kingdom, basically to oust the members of Parliament and oust Boris Johnson. Sadly, and I just read this morning about the Queen, which I've always had a lot of respect for the Queen of England, because I think that she's been very disciplined in her role and how she has performed as not only as a queen, but also as a diplomat around the world, and how she's such a dignified woman, and such a graceful presence. But I understood from this morning that she, got the vaccines, got all the boosters, and now she's taking this ivermectin, right? Where remember the international media was talking about this ivermectin as a dewormer. We all know that was a lie. So here's the Queen, taking ivermectin, and I just read that in a news article. So maybe it is true, or maybe it's not true. I just know that I read that, and I know that she's, has come down with COVID, and I pray that she'll be fine. But I use that as an example because now let's take it to the United States of America, which is a really, really important bellwether for democracy and for freedom. And the administration recently put out a Department of Homeland Security security bulletin, really a national security bulletin, basically saying that anybody that spews information or disinformation or misinformation about election fraud or about COVID, you're subject to being arrested for basically, spewing propaganda. Or in their case, they actually are starting to redefine what a domestic terrorist is. So that's one. That's number one. The second thing is that President Biden recently, I think just a few days ago, he extended the Emergency Authorization Act another 90 days. And I believe that it was done purposely and intentionally because of what was happening in Canada. And now, of course, we have this American Freedom Convoy that's that's about to begin. In fact, it may begin tomorrow. I think is the day it begins, or maybe it's today. And they're forming up all over the place, from what I understand. They're supposed to meet in Washington, D.C. Early next week sometime. So I think what's happened is the government, instead of saying, you know what, we should not have shut down our energy, we should not have raised your taxes, we should not have spent literally almost $7-8 trillion in the last year, we should not have opened up our southern border to almost 3 million people now, this illegal invasion from 151 countries from the last report. We shouldn't have done all these bad things, so forgive us, we're going to change and we're going to be better now. And actually what they've done is they've tripled down, and they've said, nope, we're going to continue with these policies that we've put in place. And, and sort of the old phrase my mother used to use was Katie bar the door. You better get ready, because you better be ready for whatever comes next. And I think that the United States of America and the people of this country, because I do watch and I pay very, very close attention to the sentiment of the American people. And I do it through the Reawaken tour. I do it through talking to my friends overseas. I have a great network overseas, a great network in Israel. I have a great network here in this country. And then I get out to the grassroots as much as I can. And the Reawaken tour allows me to do that, to gain what I call a fingertip feel of what the American people, particularly the American people, feel like today, what is happening in their lives. And most people in this country, and I think most people anywhere, I've been on 6 continents, most people in this country, what are they worried about? They're worried about what's 50 feet from their door, just sort of metaphorically. They're worried about what's 50 feet from their door. What's the price of a loaf of bread? What's the price of a gallon of gas? Can I afford to send my kid to this school or that school? Can I get to my job? If I have an emergency, is there going to be police that are going to show up to help me, or have they been defunded? If somebody breaks into my house, will there be enough police to show up? Or have they been defunded to the point where they can't even respond to these kinds of crimes anymore? And we see that all over the place. If my house if a fire starts in my neighborhood, or my house starts burning down, will the fire department show up? Can they show up? Are they still there to be able to provide me the safety? Again, what's 50 feet from my door is what the American people care about. And I take that back to my own upbringing, my own, again, I'm an older generation, but I have, a bunch of nieces and nephews that are, your guys' age. I mean, very young men and women who are just starting out in life. And I have a ton, not only my own grandkids, but a ton of great nieces and nephews, that kind of stuff. I mean, a lot of them. I mean, I'm one of 9 kids, so that tribe has expanded out quite a bit. So I not only speak to them on a routine basis, but I love to speak to young people, because I want to get a sense of what do they believe. And as I think about growing up, yeah, there were differences in the era and what was happening in the country at that time, sort of post-World War II, post the Korean War time frame, and the rise of communism and such. But I think what we have now is we have this apathy that has settled in to the American population, the American citizenry, particularly, again, my generation, where we're looking at, for primary elections as an example. Primary elections in this country are super important. Yet 30% or less than 30% of people who are capable of voting actually vote in primaries. Less than 30%. That's an amazing number. When you're talking about, upwards of 160 to 200 million people, that's in that window is the number of people that could vote. You have less than 30% of that vote nationwide in the primaries. And then for a general election, it's just around 65%. So there's 35% of the population that doesn't even vote. So that, to me, that's a very telling sign, and that's why we are where we are, because we've allowed the political class of this country to essentially, in the midst of elections that are not always perfect, and in the middle of the night when they're doing these deals, these backroom deals in Washington D.C. and some states' capitals, where they're using our hard-earned dollars to be able to take care to fill their coffers, Those are the kinds of things that we're dealing with. So I because I want to spend some time talking about what to do. Why do I remain optimistic? Because I'm very optimistic right now as I sit here with you guys today. I'm very optimistic because I know you cannot fool the American people. You just can't. And as I said earlier, this notion that truth always rises to the top. It always does. And it's going to come out whether you like it or not, no matter who you are. And that includes all of us. I mean, you just can't hide from it, and you shouldn't. The whole thing about, if you tell the truth, you don't have to worry about it all the time, right? And I've been a product of that, and I've had some life experiences that have reinforced that message to me. And I think that God knows, because as I look at my entire lifetime, but I look at the 4 or 5 lifetimes that I lived in just the last 5 years, more so than I think most human beings should ever have to experience. But yet here I am, and here we are. Our relationship is now anew, and we are all being reconnected. And I actually think that we're being reconnected through the strength of our faith. And I that's what I do believe. And I say this on every one of the Reawaken tours, or any time that I speak. I always say that prayer is the most powerful weapon system known to man. And but God also created warriors. And when he created those warriors, he gave them a task. And they don't know it all the time. In fact, many of them don't know it, and they don't know it until sometimes it's all said and done. And but it's not just that we need to pray and pray for our existence as a freedom worshiping and a faith worshiping people globally, certainly here in the United States. But we need to also understand that when it's time to stand up, step up, and speak up, as I like to say, that's the warrior fiber that God has instilled inside of us, that makes us go out and say, I am going to decide to be courageous, and I'm going to be fearless about what I believe in, and I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to fight tooth and nail for my position, or for this, I'm going to go run for office, or I'm going to go help these people out who I believe in, who I honestly, deeply believe in, or I'm going to go do something new with my church. I'm going to go get my church or my congregation fired up. I really do. Maybe we'll spend a little bit of time talking about pastors here today. So let me just stop for a second here and just see which direction or other things that you all want to talk about today.
Well, first of all, that was just fantastic, because you really laid out a lot of what we were, sort of wondering there. I mean, that covered a lot of stuff, and a lot of what you're saying is coinciding with not only the way we view, we are in agreement in these views, and we're just over the moon to hear you saying these things, but also my dad's prophecies are interwoven just in everything you're just saying right now. And so it's very interesting. I found that in the middle of all of this, you have things that my dad prophesied interwoven into this Reawaken tour now. And it's sort of remarkable a little bit how God put that together, especially the prophecy about the man named Donald and the man named Clark. And then you start to see key people being put together, and then here you are sort of leading that. And then you have my dad, who's no longer even with us, which authenticates his prophecies. There doesn't have to be a question about, did he hear something in the news, or is this his opinion? Because he's no longer alive to even have known any of the things that were coming, aside from the glimpses God showed him. But it appears to me, as I'm going on the Reawaken tour, that it's sort of beautiful the way it's been interwoven in there. And it's a confirmation too that you're doing the right thing. This is the right thing. This is the way my dad worked all the years. Mom, you could probably speak to this. Is what you guys are doing with Reawaken is what my dad did all the way up until he started going online. Which I don't know if you want to share that with him quickly a little bit.
Well, it was back in, I think, 2013 when people started going on the internet. I think we were one
No,
of
it was
the,
before that, 2007, Mom. 7 or 8.
when, I can't remember the date.
Yeah.
It's been too long.
It was 2007,
But
8.
when we first started going online, it was because Kim had we traveled the world for 30 years, and he stopped traveling because, well, the first thing that happened was I said to him, Kim, we can do this in your house, because I went to the God TV studio, and he has this little studio with a bunch of cameras, and they're speaking to everybody. I said, no, we've got the internet now. Can't we do the same thing? And the first time we did it, the whole thing crashed because there's so many people came on at the same time, and we weren't equipped to handle all of this multitude of people. So we learned how to do it, and Kim would not get up in front of on a podium in front of a camera. He was used to a big audience, sitting behind a piano, getting up and doing his ministry that way. And so what happened was, I said, well, okay, we're going to put a piano there, and you can sit behind the piano, and then you can speak that way. And so he actually did it. I was surprised at the time.
He hated the camera. He hated being on camera.
He hated the camera, but he actually eventually did that. And that's how come we got onto the internet doing it this way. And so for when COVID happened, it was perfect for us, because here we were still able to communicate with everybody, and here we are still doing it today. Although we don't have him physically in the building, we still have a way to
share what he prophesied. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I mean,
Exactly.
you know,
The
I'll
thing
tell
is,
you, when you talk about being prophetic, and that's why we're still, so here we are talking about him today, because he said things about things that were going to occur at another time, right? In the future. And a lot of people, will say, this is all crazy stuff. But I'll tell you, so two things, and one just a short thing. When you were up on the stage the other day, I was standing right next to Eric Trump, and he kept whispering in my ear that this was the first time that he had ever seen or heard of your dad. And we were talking with each other, and I said, you need to get what you showed Danae the other day on those clips. You need to get that, and I told Eric, you need to get that in front of your father. Just so at some point in time, that may happen where you go and you basically sit down with Donald Trump and walk him through, because I believe that he's aware of that, but Eric clearly wasn't. At least the way you had organized it and put it together in a very nicely done time sequencing, because it's very important. Now, in terms of your father, I'm one of these people in the intelligence business where I would take in a lot of information from a lot of places. And if you look at my background, if you really studied Mike Flynn, really get into the weeds of the kinds of things and the kinds of operations that I was involved in with intelligence, I would take information from a lot of different people. So many years ago, and Jane, that the internet, the Twitter was on or about 2003. It began. Facebook came on the scene in early 2005. So there was elements of the internet, as we now know, those two organizations which censor us, they were around then. So there began this emergence of more ways to be heard and to be seen. And I just love the way that in the videos that I've seen of Kim, where it's almost like the piano is there. I don't know. It's like a place. It's like a space that he needed. Maybe it was a connection to music, because I've always been one to study people who are really gifted musicians, because they have all these other gifts of language and stuff like that. So I'm one of these kind of different people to look at information sources and try to deduce things from those information sources. So one of the first times that I recall being sort of introduced was when somebody sent me a video clip of this Kim Clement, and it was in his discussion about the Middle East, because at the time I was I'm spending a lot of time. I spent better part of 5 years of my life in. I used to say that I lived in Iraq and I vacationed in Afghanistan, but I spent a lot of time there, and I was introduced to one of these videos, and these prophecies, and I'm just thinking, okay, so I take that as a data point, as a big data point, and I add it into all these things that I'm studying. I'm studying the Quran, I'm studying the Bible, I'm studying the history of the Middle East, I'm studying the history of Central Asia, I'm studying the connections of the Crusades. I mean, all these different things, because history does have a funny way of repeating itself, and all we're doing is we're continuing to repeat ourselves historically, even in Eastern Europe today. So when I was, that was sort of my first introduction, but it was just an observation. It was an observation until we brought really, until, really you, Danae came into sort of our lives with the Reawaken America. Now, to me, there's a much broader and more strategic view of what prophetic people, because I don't think that there's a lot of them. I think that there's people that are fake. To be very honest with you, I think that there's other people though who I've met who that come to me, and they have a lot of people, and I guess I became more of a believer in the last 5 years of my life, because people would come into my life and say that they had a particular dream. And that dream was something that there's no way in the world. And I have a couple of, not only a couple of examples, not a lot, but a couple of examples where somebody said, I dreamt this, and they sent it to me in an email, or they sent it to me in a letter, and I would show it to my wife, and I would go, there's no way that this person knew that this was happening in our lives. And yet they dreamt this. So I do believe that there are times and there's people that just have a different connection, and that's all. It's the only way I can explain it. It's the only way I can explain it. I'm not theologically smart enough to understand all of the machinations behind that. But I do believe that there are people that have a different connection for a very specific purpose, and again, only sort of God knows what that plan is. I've said this too, that our destiny on this earth is determined before we're born, and then how you move along that path is really up to you as a human, and you have to go back and seek guidance every so often. Most of us don't. Most of us just we forget, and we take for granted a lot of things in life, and as we go and as we get older, and anybody that's at my age certainly understands that. And you make mistakes, and you have tragedies, and you have good things too, many good things. So that's kind of a little bit of an understanding of sort of where I was with understanding your dad, Danae, and your husband, Jane. But I really do believe that there is a connection here, and there has to be, because here I am talking to you guys, and the only way that we met was through a guy named Clark. I forget the date on that particular video. That might have been like 2007. It might have even been 2002, or maybe it was the one that was the audio tape. I forget which one, but it's amazing, because you can't talk about Trump and trumpet and a man named Clark. It just blew me away. And I was like, wow, there's something very, very different about how people can be this way. And I believe that they don't come along all that frequently. I think that they come along and they come into our lives, and they can transcend who we are if we believe.
Well, Kim's ministry started with him being a worship leader. And he prayed a lot. And in the middle of a song, he would just break out and sing a song that he didn't know, which really touched people's hearts. And then he moved from there to where he was speaking, preaching. And then from there, another couple of years, he would pray over people and get what's called a word of knowledge. And during those many, many years, I was witness to unbelievable words of knowledge.
And we were there with him, so we knew there's no way he could have known, because we would go from place to place, and he specifically would not socialize or interact with people prior to.
Well, we traveled the world. I mean, we would go to countries where people spoke different languages, and we'd have an interpreter who was standing right there, and Kim would say to the interpreter, tell this person this. And some of the miracles of the word of knowledge, where he saw someone's predicament and was able to pray over them for healing, for whatever situation there was. I remember one person walking up to him off the stage and him saying, I hear 3 gunshots.
Oh, yes, this one. Ooh.
I hear 3 gunshots. And the woman falls down, and she said that one of her family members was shot 3 times. And incredible words of knowledge.
It was so powerful
like
too,
this.
He said, I hear gunshots, and she starts weeping, and he goes, my God, he shot his father, and he grabs the woman like that. So he was getting this incredible, but it wasn't just a show. It wasn't just about, oh, look, he can see stuff. It was actually God pinpointing the precise thing in the person's life that was holding them back from their destiny. You see, it wasn't just random.
So then what happened after that was people started swarming to the meetings because they wanted him to prophesy over them or tell them about their future. And so it got very sensational, and so he stopped doing it. And that was when he started to do the national prophecies, where he would prophesy over nations and concentrate more on what was happening in the world, which relates actually to the Bible. Bible prophecy predicts the future, and the Bible is true because the future that prophets of old prophesied actually came to pass, and you can see the witness of it in the scripture, which is actually quite unbelievable, because what's happening now with Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey, these nations are all prophesied in the Bible. In Ezekiel 38, 37, the nations will come back to the land. All of this has happened. So it's no surprise to us, it shouldn't be a surprise to us, that God knows exactly what's happening on planet Earth. He knows what's happening in Russia right now. He knows what the situation with the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian Jews. God knows everything. And so, I mean, we are sitting in the planet Earth right now, and God's prophecy throughout the Bible are actually coming to pass. And Kim was part of what's happening right now. So,
yeah, it's. I find the whole thing beautiful. It's very sad for me because I don't have like when we're at the Reawaken tour, I keep thinking, my gosh, if my dad was here, it would be so awesome.
Yeah, we'd be. I think he'd be blown away. I mean, we'd be blown away. Yeah. You know, here's kind of where I'm at, and maybe.
And he just had.
Well, I think that we are in a period right now, and I'm gonna draw on Christy here a little bit because of her being plugged into Israel, because I believe that and this is just my belief that this notion in Matthew about where he talks about the city on the hill, and I forget which chapter and verse it is, but I know it's in Matthew. He talks about the city on the hill. I actually think that the city on the hill shifted over the history of the world, and so the question is it shifting again? I don't believe it is right now, but will it ever shift in the future? And the answer is yes, it will shift. But we are in a period where I kind of call this the Great Reset versus the Great Reawakening. Okay, the Great Reset versus the Great Reawakening. And the Great Reset is clear. It's been written about. It's being talked about. It is a group of people that see that we should have a one world government. There are world organizations such as the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, World Bank, the European Union, which actually sees itself in a much larger role, but they're not really a world organization per se, but they see themselves operating at a different level. So you have this great reset toward one world. That's really what this is about, versus the great reawakening. And the reawakening is of the remnant, and I said the other day in Ohio in our Reawaken tour, I don't like that word remnant, because remnant on a battlefield means that you're a straggler and you're lost. But maybe to a degree, we are as a faith-based community, or communities plural, because it really is plural, that there is an awakening of our faith, because people like my father taught me, there's no atheists in a foxhole. I'm not against atheists. If that's what people want to believe, that's up to them. But I can tell you that when it comes to combat operations, believe me, I've never heard anybody go, I'm going to pray to, this. They would go, God help us, as you were getting shot at, riding in a helicopter or on the ground, whatever. So, there is a great reawakening happening, and we are seeing that across the entire planet. Those nations that still have a very recent taste of freedom are fighting for that. And, we can go into all the stuff going on over in Eastern Europe. From a political and strategy standpoint, the United States and NATO, and, maybe not NATO so much, or some of the nations over there, because they probably knew, but we've really been outsmarted by Russia, by Putin, been in a big, big way, and so outsmarted. He's such a master strategist. And frankly, here in the United States, over the last 5 years, maybe even longer, but certainly the last 5 years, through the American media, we've been trained to hate Russia, right? We've been just bombarded with Russia. And so we've been trained to see Russia as the boogeyman, instead of a nation that maybe we can try to work together with, right? And, on different issues. But, and people have asked me, well, if you were in the White House, what would you do in this situation? I would say we would never been in this situation. So it's a hypothetical that would have never occurred. So I'm not going to answer the question like that, because I would have never allowed it to get to this disastrous of a point. So there is a reawakening going on, and it's going on across really the grassroots of freedom-loving people globally. And I will tell you back to the city on a hill, the shining city, right? As Reagan, I think, used that word, shining. That in order for that light to be bright, it's only bright not necessarily if we have strong leadership at the top. Reagan was a strong leader. Trump was a strong leader at the top of our government. But when we have strong leaders across the communities, and this is where I talked earlier about talking a little bit about pastors, I think that the clergy in the country, in the United States of America, I'll speak for the United States, not so much other parts of the world, but the clergy, and this is sort of all faith, but primarily the Judeo-Christian faith of this country, there has to be an equal awakening of that element within our society, because there has to be strength demonstrated from the pulpit. There has to be courage demonstrated from the pulpit. There has to be a fearlessness demonstrated from the pulpit. And those that don't do that, it's like a business, right? They're losing members of their congregation because they're going elsewhere. People walk away from churches. People walk away from faith because they're not getting out of it what they believe they should be getting out of it. And those that are really strong, courageous, fearless, believers and fighters of their faith, their congregations are actually growing. And I've seen that. And we have actually people that are members of our Reawaken America events that are in touch with, or they have their own congregations. And they are all those things that I said. In order for America to continue to be that city on the hill that was described in Matthew, because I believe early on in a different era of our world's history, probably Jerusalem. And I would argue, tooth and nail that it was. But I think that over time, that shifted. It doesn't take away from what Israel represents as a very biblically and historically precious gem of a nation state on the planet. But it's how we fight for and stand for our ability to practice what it is that we want to practice. And that means our faith. And I always say, if you really study the history of the United States of America, just like, the birth and the rise of the state of Israel over its existence, and especially that part of the world. But when you look at the United States of America, it really goes back to the mid 1500s, 1600s, into the 1700s. It was really an escape from being persecuted in Europe for your faith, and they went to this place called that a guy by the name of Winthrop coined New England. New England, and obviously we have a New England in the United States, but he actually coined that term to his congregation in 1630. We're going to New England, or they also described it as the New World. And this, as he described in Matthew, was the city on the hill that we are seeking, where all of us can be equal. We can all practice the way we want to practice. I mean, this guy, Winthrop, who became the first mayor of Boston, he actually said that. He said that to his congregation. And these are people made up of lawyers, businessmen, and people that could only afford a ticket on the ships going across the Atlantic. So it's really important that we understand all these pieces in context, because it takes us to where we are today and the current events that we are seeing playing out on a daily basis for all of us to be that we're living through. I mean, this is a moment in history. So when you say current events and what's happening currently, because from a talk show or a podcast standpoint, you'll do another one next week or whatever, and you want to talk about, well, what's going on next week? Well, what's happening now, the historical context, the 60,000 foot level, is we have to put this into the perspective of not only where we have been as a nation, and now I'm talking about the United States of America, but where are we today, and where do we, the people, want to go? Where do we want to take it? Because essentially we are still empowered by our Constitution, and we are still enabled to do the things that we are able to do, but we've got to pay attention. If there is a spark that's going to light the fire of our destiny, it's going to be this reawakening of the grassroots of America that says, look, I don't want I'm not going to let this abuse of my children go on anymore. I'm not going to let this horrible education system continue to do this, to instill these rotten egg values that they're trying to instill. I am not going to continue to put people into office that are raising the price of gas, doubling it, tripling it. We can no longer afford the American dream. One of the pieces of the American dream was to be able to build your own home. Well, the price of a home, as of yesterday, I spoke to one of the largest home builders in the middle of the country yesterday, and it's now costing 2 and 3 times as much to achieve the American dream, which is the American dream was always being able to own your own home. So all these things that I'm talking about, because we can get into the tactics, we can get into the weeds, and we can get into the essence of how I feel today and what is happening today on the streets of America with rising crime rates and all the bad things. But I think what we need to do is we need to uplift, and we need to tell people, it's like when I look at Israel, and I've always had extraordinary respect. I've been there a bunch of times. I've just extraordinary respect for the Israeli people, and definitely for the Israeli military and others that are in their government. When I look at that is a nation state that has fought tooth and nail and had to, because they're in this sea of turmoil, right? So you have this bright, like I described it as a gem in this sea of turmoil over there, and it's down in this murky water, but it continues to shine a bright light, right? Because of what they are and what they represent. And it's very, very biblical. It is very biblical. Well, transfer that to the United States of America.
Well, definitely.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jane. I'll go on and on.
God's hand is definitely on the state of Israel. I know a lot of people out there don't understand the significance of the Jewish state, but the fact is that God made a covenant with that Jewish state back in Genesis
12, verse
Genesis
3.
chapter 15. There's a covenant, but yeah, God made this covenant with the Jewish people. Actually, not with the Jewish people. He made it with himself. And the covenant, because he put Abram to sleep. So Abram wasn't part of the actual ceremony, because God, in his glory, walked through these pieces of the animals, the sacrifice. And so in Ezekiel, it speaks about God's not happy with Israel, of course, but he says that he's going to preserve them because of his great name. Not for your sake, Israel, but for my great name, because you see, he made a covenant with those Jewish people, and he can't turn back on that covenant, actually. So it's us here in the United States that need to be worried a little bit about what's happening in the world. But the Jews, God will protect them ultimately. Although Iran is trying to destroy the Jewish nation, they will never be successful, because the God of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps, the Bible says.
If I can jump in for a second.
And that's what Daddy would shout, Israel is forever.
If I can jump in for a second. General Flynn, firstly, thank you for everything you've said. Also, the scripture you're talking about is Matthew 5:14, about the city on the hill shining brightly. And I think what you're speaking about there being a great reawakening, linking in with what Jane is saying, I think Israel is an integral part of everything you're speaking about. Because when we're in a time now where so many people are struggling with hopelessness, Israel is the imagery for us. It is the presentation. It is the ultimate symbol of God's character never being rescinded. So the covenants that he made are preserved. I mean, it was 2,000 years from the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 up until May 14th, 1948, when it was miraculously rebirthed. We constantly look to Israel because Isaiah in chapter 66:8, can a nation be born in a day, yet no sooner is Zion in labor than she brings forth her sons. This is the prophet prophesying 700 years before the birth of Jesus, seeing a day, a time, a place where Israel was miraculously reborn in May 14th, 1948. And then Isaiah 35, speaking about how the desert will bloom. For so many years, people thought that was figurative, but it's literal, because now, as you know, I've been to Israel a number of times. It's a great passion. You drive through the desert and it's genuinely blooming. So what you're saying about there being this great reawakening happening, I think such a big part of it, and it's definitely a focus for us here in the ministry. Kim prophesied so much about America and Israel, America and Israel, and America and Israel. And I think it's such a beautiful opportunity for people to, like Jane was saying, kind of come into this understanding of the importance of Israel, how it's an integral part, even being linked in with the United States. And it just makes me so excited, because in this time, I mean, for so many people with everything that happened with the election, everybody did feel hopeless. But I look at Israel constantly, the amount of prophecies that have been fulfilled. There's only a little bit left to go. Jane and I are waiting. We're waiting for this covenant to take place that Daniel prophesied about, because that's going to be a symbol for us. But Israel as a nation is such an incredible, it's a literal symbol for us of the character of God, the promises of God, and that what he says he's going to do, he'll do. So I get excited about that, and I love what you were speaking about from Matthew chapter 5, and I do think that you were speaking about how much you love Israel as well, and I think it's a beautiful thing that the American people, especially American Christians, understand more and more that Israel is so important, and that we stand with her in every situation. So I just wanted to jump in there and say that for one quick second, because it made me really excited.
You made me think about something. When I was there visiting some military friends on while I was in the military, they took me to Masada.
Yes.
And we went up to the top of it.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So anybody that watches this, if you haven't read the story of Masada, it's a fascinating story. But it's a story of, among other things, it's a story of culture and making sure that one's culture stays, I guess, pure. I don't know, maybe that's not the right word, but I just, because there's strength, courage, there's all kinds of components of what occurred at Masada. But it's one of these places where they take young recruits,
yes,
military recruits, and they take them up there to remind them about sacrifice, But when I talk about culture, there is an effort, back to the Great Reset versus the Great Reawakening. There is an effort to change the culture of America to something that it's not. And we have, and it's, with 320 to 350 million people, and the imposing of millions more of illegals coming into our country on this invasion that's going on. Our culture can get watered down. What is the bigger question is, what is the American culture? Maybe we spend another time talking about that, but because I have my opinions about that. Here's I would just say to you guys, first of all, we got to get Christy to the show, to the Reawakening America tour, because what she just said just blew me away. Yeah, and your mom and Jane as well. We've got to get them out to San Diego or to Oregon. Probably San Diego would be nicer because it's warmer weather right now.
I was planning to attend, so
yeah, you should come out there. You should come out there because what you just said is really, really powerful.
Thank you.
And I think that we have a need and a responsibility, I think, with our events, because these are not just some meet and then go home. We are trying to reinstill the idea that America is that city on the hill, that America is a great nation, that we as American citizens have rights, responsibilities, and we must exercise those as free citizens. And that in order to remain free, in order to remain the kind of society and the kind of culture that we have, we are going to have to sacrifice. And sacrifice comes through all kinds of examples. But, people around the world, I know, because I've seen it, are willing to sacrifice for a lot more than Americans are typically willing to sacrifice for. And I think because we have had such a great life, and I think that life was given to us by my parents' generation. My father was a World War II, Korea War generation guy. He retired as a sergeant from the Army. But when they handed off, when he and my mom, who are both deceased, when they handed off to my brothers and sisters, they handed us on a silver platter a beautiful country, a beautiful experiment in democracy called the Constitution, a government of a constitutional republic called the United States of America. It was on a silver platter. It was just basically treat others like you want to be treated, be lifelong learners, and work hard, and you can have a great life, And that's it. It's that simple. And then what we did was my generation, we turned right around and just got apathetic, and we lost sight of God. We lost sight of our faith. We lost sight of life. The very first thing that our founders argued about in that beautiful phrase, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, was life, because without life, you cannot have liberty or you cannot pursue happiness. So that actually was the easiest part of that wonderful phrase. The other two components, that's why liberty came after life, because that was relatively easy to argue. And there's great stories and great histories written about this in the notes of the founders. The biggest thing was pursuit of economic strength, or all kinds of different things, but pursuit of happiness, because that's really, at the end of the day, if we have life, we have liberty, then we should be relatively, kind, happy people. And I can say that one thing, that the American people are still on this planet the most generous nation on this planet, because of when bad things happen, the American people always rise to the occasion, and they do it out of the kindness of their heart. And they do it from their heart. They don't do it because they're told to do it. And right now we're being told to do too many things, and the American people are relenting, or they're not relenting. They're resisting that, and they're trying to do it in a very civic, very professional way. And I think that the upcoming political atmosphere in our country, we're going to see many, many, many more people getting involved in local level and state level of politics. And again, I'm not saying one way or the other, which what you should do. If people go back and look at my political history, they'll see exactly how I grew up, But what I'm telling people to do is protect the way our life is, protect our way of life, another way to say it, by being actively involved as citizens in this free country that we have. Otherwise, we will lose it. And that's like Benjamin Franklin said, coming out the hall after they ratified the Constitution in 1787 when a woman said, well, what do we got? What kind of government we have? And he said, we have a republic if we can keep it. So I want to keep it. I know millions and millions of other Americans are like me, and we want to keep it. So we're going to do everything that we can to do that. So I just want to say to you guys, I am deeply, deeply honored to have this conversation with you, to have met you, Danae, and now Jane and Christy, and I look forward to meeting you guys, all again physically, and getting a chance to share some other experiences. So thank you so much for allowing me on, and get out there and mix it up just like you always do, because you really have an amazing legacy to continue to educate people about. Because I think the more you, and Danae, I think something that I find in you as a child of, not only having my own children, but just you resonate extraordinary, not just pride, because I think it's not the right word, but you resonate you resonate a very, very, I think, a generous spirit for your father, and you really are showcasing something to the world that we could easily lose sight of if we are not reminded about it. And I think your ability to remind us about it, and what I just witnessed, was extraordinary. And I think we need to continue to do that, because I think you guys, and Jane probably knows this more than anybody. In fact, I would say to her, she certainly knows it, that there are other things that your dad said, and Jane, your husband, said, that we still have yet to hear. And I think that we're going to hear more from him in the future, and we're going to go, wow. And now it's just that those things were said, but it's also what do we do about it? Because that's really what I get. But I'm that kind of guy. It's like, okay, so I hear this was said, and now I'm looking around the room for anybody else that wants to move to the sound, right? I want to now gather up the people that are willing to go and solve these problems that were prophetic and for real. So anyway, thanks guys so much for allowing me some time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, it was such an honor. It's so nice talking to you. We could sit here and do this all day.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much for your time and for your insight and what you were able to share with us, because it is more than, like I keep trying to tell people, this isn't just a spectacle to show you, oh, my dad could see things in the future. I think that there is help in there, if I could put it that way. In the Bible, the prophets would go to the kings. And so, if you see how God used my dad, particularly seeing future leaders, especially of America, but of other nations as well, near Barkat in Israel is another one he saw. And when he met him, he said, you're going to be a future prime minister. And Nir Barkat was the mayor of Jerusalem at the time. He said, no, I'm getting out of politics, which I believe he did, but now he's going to run Christie Likud party.
Likud, yeah.
Netanyahu's
Yeah,
party.
Likud, yeah.
So even that, so there's so many things in there. And it not only gives us a confirmation as the people of Christ looking at this and okay, well, we have Kim said this and this and this, but it guides us as well. And especially, this is why I wanted whatever I could get to Donald Trump, because I know he's the chosen leader. Whatever can help, because sometimes I can look at prophecies, or we can look at it, and it doesn't make sense to us. But when the right people look at it, it could make sense to them and help. And I think ultimately that is what can happen through the prophetic. And this is something I keep looking at now, because Dad prophesied all these things, and there's so many things that haven't happened. The things that have are incredible. And so there's a guide that God gave us, and it's just a beautiful way in which he works, I think. And so
I'll tell you what, you blew Eric Trump away the other day. I know that he went and spoke to his dad about it. I'm going to follow up with him and just say, I really do think that at some point in time here, relatively in the near future, that you're going to need to put something together, basically what you've done, and you sit down there and with him and just kind of say, here's what let me lay this out for you, and I know he'll be blown away. He's not one. This is Trump now. He's not one to take it and go, okay, I'm the chosen one. He's not like that. What he is he's very down to earth. But the fact that you can't deny what was said at a time when there was no Trump on the. I mean, he was a character in the sort of the media world and sort of in the business world, but not somebody in the lifeblood of our nation and nations, of nations. So. And I think that now we're starting to see that. Boy, if you didn't think that this was a spiritual war that we're involved in, I'll tell you what, it is a massive spiritual war beyond anything I've ever witnessed in my life, certainly. And I've seen a lot, and I've studied a lot.
Day to day, it has been shocking.
Yeah. So listen, I gotta get going. It's great. I look forward to seeing you guys here soon. I hope all of you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yes.
All right. God bless.
See you in San Diego.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, so thank you, General Flynn, for being with us today. And I know that all of you out there are just so excited that he came on. Current events, Clement Ministries, and the House of Destiny. We're so glad that you joined us today. And so Christy is going to take us out with some information, and then she's going to pray for Ukraine and Russia and everything that's going on in the world. So go ahead, Christy.
Well, what an amazing treat. He's really lovely, and that was excellent. But yes, obviously, the thing that we're watching so much right now is Russia and the Ukraine. And for a lot of us, there's nothing much that we can do except for pray. And we do also have a way that you can be involved yourself. We have this incredible campaign running right now where we are standing with Ukrainian Jews, and now more than ever, they need our help. They're being persecuted. And when you sow and donate into this campaign that we're running, every cent is going directly to the Ukraine. We're bringing some of them over to Israel, moving. Aliyah is happening, and then we're also providing food, medical supplies, emergency relief. They're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen now with what's happening with Russia. And by sowing into this, you are part of fulfilling ancient prophecy out of the book of Zechariah, which is incredible. And you are also making a difference eternally in people's lives. So that, there's a banner that comes up on your screen, and you can just click Stand with the Ukrainian Jews, and whatever it is that you sow, I know that God's going to multiply it, and we're really expecting to just raise so much money that we're able to send there, and we're very excited about that. But for now, let's do what it is that we can do as well, which is pray. So Father, we thank you that you are omniscient, you are omnipotent. There is nothing in all of heaven and earth that is out of your control. You are completely aware of the situation going on in Russia right now and with the Ukrainians. And God, we are asking that you would bring supernatural intervention. At the end of the day, some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. And so we ask for peace in the region. We ask for supernatural divine intervention. We pray for protection over every single vulnerable, innocent person, over every civilian. And Father, we ask that you would expose every hidden secret plan, every hidden secret work of darkness. We're trusting that everything whispered in the shadows will be brought out into the light. And we're trusting that we are going to see something of biblical proportions take place in this region. We ask for your protection specifically over the Jews in the region that are being persecuted. And I ask, God, that you would move on all of our hearts, that as we sow and give, that we would know that we are part of something, that while also fulfilling ancient prophecy, we are also saving people's lives. And we thank you that you, the Holy One of Israel, do not slumber or sleep. You have not lost control at any point. And I thank you that our hope is firmly in Jesus, the rock upon whom our salvation is built. And we're trusting you that we are going to see you move mightily this week in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. God bless you guys. Thank you for joining us on Current Events, and we'll see you next time.
There is a crisis in Ukraine. Our beloved Jewish Ukrainians are under attack. The Jews always come under attack first, and we, like you, love Israel and the Jewish people. Together we are committed to standing with Jews around the world. Zechariah chapter 8. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will save my people from the countries of the east and the west. I will bring them back to live in Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I will be faithful and righteous to them as their God. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Zechariah saw the time we are living in right now. a time when Jews who had been scattered throughout the earth would be brought back to Jerusalem, miraculously, and dwell once more in the Holy Land with the Holy One of Israel. By partnering with us on this project, you are part of fulfilling ancient prophecy. Every cent donated will go directly to the Ukrainian Jews in need, and together with us, we will be the hands and feet of prophecy in action.